The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored paper with elegant script that belonged to another era. Elena Whitmore set down her coffee cup and stared at the return address. Ashford and Associates, estate attorneys, Magnolia Creek, Georgia. She'd never heard of Magnolia Creek, much less anyone named Ashford. You are cordially requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Mrs. Josephine Eleanor Ashford. Elena read aloud to her empty kitchen. The formal language felt strange on her tongue. Your presence is required as a named beneficiary. Elena wheeled her chair closer to the window, letting the morning light illuminate the mysterious invitation. 3 years had passed since the accident that changed everything, since she'd traded her dancing dreams for physical therapy school, since she'd learned to navigate the world from a different perspective. She'd built a quiet life in Atlanta, helping others reclaim their strength. Mystery inheritances from strangers didn't fit into that carefully constructed routine, but something about the letter tugged at her curiosity. 2 days later, Elena found herself driving through the Georgia countryside, her hand-controlled Honda navigating winding roads lined with Spanish moss and towering magnolias. Magnolia Creek announced itself with a weathered wooden sign and a main street that looked frozen in time. Antebellum homes with wraparound porches, a courthouse with white columns, and storefronts that had probably looked the same for 50 years. Ashford Manor sat on the outskirts of town, a grand Victorian house with gingerbread trim and gardens that had once been magnificent but now showed signs of gentle neglect. Elena parked in the circular drive and transferred to her wheelchair, adjusting the flowing sundress she'd chosen for the occasion. The front door stood open, and she could hear voices from within. As she navigated the wooden ramp that had been installed beside the front steps, she noticed a pickup truck loaded with lumber and tools. You must be Miss Whitmore. Eleanor turned to see a man emerging from behind the truck, and her breath caught. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and kind eyes the color of Georgia clay. His white t-shirt was dusty from work, and he held a measuring tape in his calloused hands. "I'm Tom Caldwell," he said, then seemed to freeze as he took in her wheelchair. His face reddened slightly. I'm sorry, I didn't expect. That is, I'm working on the house restoration." Elena smiled, recognizing the familiar awkwardness that often accompanied first meetings. "Don't worry about it. Is the attorney inside?" "Yes, Mom. Mr. Patterson's in the parlor with the family." Tom gestured toward the door, then seemed to realize she might need assistance. Would you like me to? I've got it, but no, thank you." Elena wheeled herself up the ramp and through the doorway, aware of Tom's concerned gaze following her. The interior of Ashford Manor was breathtaking. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across hardwood floors that gleamed despite their age. A curved staircase dominated the foyer, its banister carved with intricate roses. "Miss Whitmore, I presume?" A thin man in a charcoal suit approached. "Benjamin Patterson, attorney for the estate. We're just about to begin." The parlor held 5 people arranged in a semicircle of mismatched chairs. Eleanor recognized the type. Distant relatives drawn by the prospect of inheritance, their faces wearing expressions of forced solemnity tinged with greed. A middle-aged man with silver hair and expensive clothes dominated the group, his cold blue eyes assessing Elena with obvious disapproval. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Patterson began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "we gather today for the reading of Mrs. Josephine Eleanor Ashford's last will and testament." As the attorney's voice droned through legal preliminaries, Eleanor studied the room. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of Ashfords, with their proud bearing and penetrating gazes. Fresh magnolia blossoms sat in a crystal vase, their sweet fragrance filling the air. "To my nephew Marcus Ashford, I leave my collection of first edition books and the sum of $50,000, Patterson read. Marcus's jaw tightened. 50,000 was clearly less than he'd expected. To the Magnolia Creek Historical Society, I bequeath my antique furniture collection and $25,000 for its preservation. The relatives shifted restlessly in their seats, and finally, Patterson's voice grew more formal, to Miss Elena Catherine Whitmore of Atlanta, Georgia, I leave the remainder of my estate, including Ashford Manor and all its contents, my investment, portfolio, and liquid assets totaling approximately $2.8 million. The room erupted. Marcus shot to his feet, his face crimson. This is impossible. Who is this woman? Aunt Josephine never mentioned anyone named Whitmore. Eleanor sat frozen, her hands gripping her wheelchair's armrests. $2.8 million. It was incomprehensible. However, Patterson continued, raising his voice above the chaos, this inheritance comes with one condition. Miss Whitmore must reside at Ashford Manor for a period of 6 months, beginning immediately, in order to understand the true value of the Ashford legacy, as Mrs. Ashford stated in her will. This is ridiculous, Marcus snarled, turning to Elena. What did you do to influence my aunt? How did you even know her? I didn't, Elena managed to say. I've never heard of Mrs. Ashford in my life. Convenient, muttered a woman who'd been introduced as Marcus's sister, as the relatives filed out, making threats of legal challenges and muttering about fortune hunters. Eleanor remained in her chair, overwhelmed. Mr. Patterson approached with a manila folder. Mrs. Ashford left this for you, he said gently. She was quite specific that you should read it privately. Elena accepted the folder with trembling hands. Through the parlor window she could see Tom loading boards onto his truck, his movements efficient and sure. Something about his steady presence in the midst of this chaos felt comforting. Alone in the parlor, Elena opened the folder. Inside was a handwritten letter in the same elegant script as the invitation. My dear Elena, if you are reading this, then I have passed on, and you are no doubt confused by this unexpected inheritance. Please know that nothing about this decision was random or impulsive. I have watched you from afar, following your journey with admiration and growing love. The path that brought you to my attention was born from tragedy, but your response to that tragedy revealed a strength of character that reminded me of someone very precious to me, someone I lost through my own pride and stubbornness many years ago. Live in this house, child. Walk through its rooms and tend its gardens. Perhaps in time you will understand why your happiness became so important to a stranger. The truth lies in the past, but your future is yours to choose. With love and hope, Josephine Ashford Elena read the letter 3 times, but its meaning remained elusive. How had Josephine Ashford been watching her? Why would a stranger in small-town Georgia care about an Atlanta physical therapist she'd never met? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Tom stood in the doorway, his expression uncertain. I'm sorry to bother you, he said. I just wanted to say, whatever folks might think about all this, Mrs. Ashford was a good woman. If she left you, this place, she had her reasons. Elena looked up at him, struck by the kindness in his voice. You knew her well? Well enough. I've been working on the house for about 6 months, fixing the roof, updating the electrical, making it livable again. She was particular about things being done right, but she was fair, and she was lonely. Tom paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. She used to sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the road like she was waiting for someone. Waiting for me? Maybe. Tom's eyes met hers, and Elena felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. Attraction, pure and simple. Are you planning to stay? Eleanor looked around the beautiful parlor, then back at the letter in her hands. 6 months in a stranger's house in a town where she knew no one, inheriting a fortune she didn't understand from a woman she'd never met. It was insane. I think I am, she heard herself say. Tom smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "Then I guess I'll be seeing you around, Miss Whitmore." "Elena," she corrected. "Just Elena." After Tom left, Elena wheeled herself through the house, exploring room after room, filled with antique furniture, family portraits, and the accumulated treasures of generations. In the library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held leather-bound volumes that smelled of age and wisdom. The kitchen was spacious and well-appointed, with modern appliances that suggested recent renovation, but it was the small room tucked behind the library that stopped Elena cold. The door was barely noticeable, painted the same cream color as the walls. Inside, Elena found a space that felt like a shrine. Newspaper clippings covered one wall, all of them about the same story. Local woman dies in highway accident, daughter injured. There was her parents' obituary, articles about her recovery, even a piece from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about her graduation from physical therapy school. In the center of the room sat a small desk with a leather journal. Eleanor opened it with shaking hands and found pages of entries in Josephine's careful script dating back 3 years. March 15th. The accident was in today's paper. Sarah is gone, and her daughter Elena is in critical condition. I should go to her, but how can I explain? How do I tell a stranger that her grandmother has been searching for her family for 20 years? April 2nd. Elena is recovering well, according to the follow-up article. She looks so much like Sarah at that age. The same stubborn chin, the same determined eyes. September 12th. Elena has started physical therapy school. She's choosing to help others heal, just as Sarah always wanted to help people. Perhaps something good can come from this tragedy after. All Elena's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Grandmother. Josephine Ashford was her grandmother, and Sarah, her mother Sarah Whitmore, had been Josephine's daughter. The pieces fell into place with stunning clarity. Her mother's reluctance to talk about her family, the way she'd changed the subject whenever Eleanor asked about grandparents. "Some families are better left in the past," Sarah used to say, a shadow of old pain crossing her face. Now Eleanor understood. Her mother had run away from Magnolia Creek, from this house and this family, and had never looked back. But Josephine had been searching, waiting, hoping for reconciliation that never came, until now. Elena sat in the hidden room as evening shadows lengthened, holding pieces of a puzzle that was finally beginning to make sense. Outside, she could hear Tom's truck starting up, the sound of his workday ending. Tomorrow she would have questions for him. Tomorrow she would begin to uncover the full truth about the Ashford family and her mother's mysterious past. But tonight, she simply sat in her grandmother's secret room, surrounded by years of longing and loss, and felt the first stirring of something she'd thought was gone forever, the sense of belonging somewhere. Elena woke to the sound of hammering and the scent of magnolia blossoms drifting through her open bedroom window. She'd spent her first week at the manor settling into the master suite on the ground floor, a room Josephine had clearly prepared for her, complete with an accessible bathroom and furniture arranged to accommodate her wheelchair. The hammering stopped as she made her way to the kitchen, and she found Tom sitting at the breakfast table with a cup of coffee and what appeared to be architectural drawings spread before him. "Morning," he said, looking up with a smile that made her pulse quicken. "Hope I didn't wake you. I started early because it's supposed to rain this afternoon. You didn't wake me." Elena maneuvered to the coffee maker, hyper-aware of his presence. Over the past week, their interactions had grown comfortable, filled with easy conversation about the house's restoration and the town's history. But underneath the comfort lay an undercurrent of attraction that neither had acknowledged aloud. "What are you working on?" she asked, settling across from him with her coffee. "Plans for the back porch repair. The foundation's solid, but some of the support beams need replacing. Tom's finger traced a line on the blueprint, and Elena found herself watching the movement of his hands, capable, gentle hands that handled both delicate restoration work and heavy lumber with equal skill. "Tom," she began, then hesitated. She'd been wanting to ask about her mother all week, but hadn't found the courage. "Did you ever hear Josephine mention a daughter? Someone named Sarah?" Tom's expression grew thoughtful. "She mentioned having family once, said they'd had a falling out years ago. She never gave details, but sometimes when she talked about it she looked—" He paused, searching for words. "Broken, I guess, like it was her biggest regret." Eleanor nodded, filing away this piece of information. She'd spent hours in Josephine's hidden room, reading through the journal entries and newspaper clippings, piecing together her grandmother's decades-long search for her lost daughter. But she still didn't understand what had driven her mother away. "Elena, there's something else," Tom said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I wanted to warn you. People in town are talking." "About the inheritance? About you being an outsider who somehow convinced a lonely old woman to change her will? Marcus has been making the rounds, stirring up sentiment against you." Tom's jaw tightened. "Yesterday at Murphy's Hardware, I heard him telling folks you probably manipulated Mrs. Ashford while she was ill." Elena set down her coffee cup, suddenly understanding the cold looks she'd received at the grocery store. "What do you think?" Tom met her eyes directly. "I think Mrs. Ashford was the sharpest woman in 3 counties right up until the day she died. And I think if she'd left you this place, she had damn good reasons." The conviction in his voice sent warmth spreading through Elena's chest. "Thank you for telling me. There's more. Some of my crew have started asking questions about why I'm still working here, suggesting that associating with you might hurt my business." Tom rolled up the blueprints, his movements sharp with frustration. "Jim Morrison cancelled his barn renovation yesterday, said he was going with someone else." Elena felt a stab of guilt. "Tom, I don't want your work to suffer because of me." "My work will be fine," he said firmly. "The people worth working for won't be swayed by gossip." Over the following days, the town's hostility became increasingly apparent. At the post office, conversations stopped when Elena entered. The waitress at Magnolia Diner served her with barely concealed resentment. Someone left a newspaper clipping about inheritance fraud in her mailbox, and one morning she found "thief" spray-painted on the manor's front gate, but there were bright spots too. Tom arrived each morning with coffee and pastries from the bakery, his presence a steady comfort in the midst of the storm. Their conversations grew deeper, ranging from his time in the army to her dreams of opening a rehabilitation center someday. They worked together in Josephine's garden, Elena directing from her wheelchair while Tom handled the heavier tasks, and she found herself looking forward to these quiet moments more than she cared to admit. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching fireflies dance among the magnolia trees, Tom reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from Elena's face. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that she caught her breath. "I'm glad you stayed," he said quietly. "So am I," Elena whispered, meaning it completely. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of cars pulling into the driveway. Marcus Ashford's silver Mercedes led a procession of 3 vehicles, and Elena's heart sank as she recognized several town council members emerging from the other cars. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus called as the group approached the porch. "We need to talk." Tom stood, positioning himself slightly in front of Elena's wheelchair. "She doesn't have to talk to anyone." "Actually, she does," said Councilman Bradley, a thin man with a perpetual scowl. "We've had numerous complaints about the circumstances of Mrs. Ashford's will. There are questions about its validity. Elena lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of strength she'd developed during her long recovery. What kind of questions? Marcus stepped forward, his expression triumphant. Questions about whether my aunt was in her right mind when she allegedly changed her will to benefit a complete stranger. Questions about whether you had inappropriate influence over a vulnerable elderly woman. That's ridiculous, Tom said, his voice tight with anger. Mrs. Ashford was as sharp as anyone I've ever met. Were you present when she signed the will, Mr. Caldwell? Marcus asked smoothly. Can you attest to her mental state on that specific day? Tom's silence was answer enough. I thought not. Marcus turned back to Elena. We're prepared to contest this will in court. It could take years to resolve, and the legal fees alone will eat up a significant portion of the estate. Wouldn't it be easier for everyone if you simply renounced your claim and returned to Atlanta? Elena felt the weight of their stares, the hostility radiating from the group. Part of her wanted to flee, to escape back to her quiet, predictable life where she didn't have to face accusations and suspicion every day. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Marcus replied, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. Take all the time you need, but understand that this situation won't simply go away. After the group left, Elena and Tom sat in silence on the porch. The fireflies had disappeared, and the night felt oppressive despite the gentle breeze. You can't let them bully you into giving up, Tom said eventually. Can't I? Elena turned to face him. Maybe they're right, Tom. Maybe I don't belong here. I never even knew Josephine existed until 2 weeks ago. But you're here now, and whether or not you understand why, she wanted you here. Elena nodded, but doubt had taken root in her heart. That night, she returned to Josephine's hidden room and found a manila folder she'd overlooked before. Inside were legal documents, multiple versions of Josephine's will spanning several years. The earliest version left everything to Marcus. The second, dated 2 years later, split the estate between Marcus and several charities. The third version, dated just 6 months ago, named Elena as the primary beneficiary for the first time. But there was a fourth document, and Elena's blood ran cold as she read it. Dated just 3 days before Josephine's death, it revoked all previous wills and left the entire estate to the Magnolia Creek Historical Preservation Society. Elena stared at the document, her hands shaking. If this will was valid, then she had no claim to the manor or the inheritance. Everything Marcus had said might be true. Perhaps Josephine had changed her mind at the last minute, deciding that leaving her fortune to a stranger was a mistake. The doubt that had been gnawing at her all week crystallized into certainty. She didn't belong here. She was an interloper in a family that had never wanted her, inheriting money and property that should rightfully go to people who had actually known and loved Josephine. Elena closed the folder and wheeled herself back to her bedroom, but sleep eluded her. By morning, she had made her decision. She found Tom in the library, installing new shelving brackets. The sight of him working so carefully on a house that might not even be hers made her chest tight with emotion. "Tom," she said, and something in her voice made him set down his drill and turn to face her. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. "I found another will," Elena explained, showing him the document. "Josephine might have changed her mind right before she died. Marcus could be right about everything." Tom read the document carefully, his expression growing troubled. "Elena, this doesn't look right. The paper's different from the other wills, and the signature seems different. How? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but something feels off about it." Elena wanted to believe him, but the weight of the town's hostility and her own doubts was too much. "Even if this will is fake, what does it matter? I'll spend years in court fighting people who knew Josephine their whole lives, people who think I manipulated a dying woman. How can I live with that?" Tom stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Because sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. Mrs. Ashford chose you, Elena. She had reasons, even if we don't understand them yet. I'm tired of fighting, Tom. I've been fighting for 3 years, fighting to walk again, fighting to build a new life, fighting to prove I'm more than my limitations. I don't have the energy to fight an entire town. Tom reached out as if to take her hands, then let his arms fall to his sides. What about us? What about what's happening between us? Eleanor's heart broke at the pain in his voice. There is no us, Tom. There's a man who's been kind to a stranger, and a woman who's been fooling herself into thinking she could belong somewhere she was never meant to be. She left him, standing in the library, and went to pack her few belongings. By afternoon, she would be gone from Magnolia Creek, leaving behind the brief, shining dream of a place where she might have been happy. Elena had been back in Atlanta for 3 days when Tom appeared at her apartment door. She opened it to find him standing in the hallway, his hair tousled and his clothes wrinkled as if he'd driven straight through the night. "Don't say anything yet," he said, holding up a hand. "Just let me show you something." He pulled out a manila envelope, his expression urgent. "I couldn't let you leave thinking that fourth will was real, so I took it to a friend of mine in Savannah. Jake's an expert in document authentication for insurance fraud cases." Elena's pulse quickened as Tom spread several photographs on her kitchen table. They showed the fourth will under different types of lighting and magnification. "The paper's wrong," Tom explained, pointing to subtle differences in texture and color. "It's modern paper made to look aged, but the chemical composition is different from the paper used in the other wills. And look at this." He indicated a close-up of Josephine's signature. "See how the ink sits on the surface instead of absorbing into the paper fibers. This was signed with a modern pen, not the fountain pen Mrs. Ashford always used." Elena stared at the evidence, her heart pounding. "So, it's a forgery? Jake's willing to testify to that in court." "But Elena, that's not the only thing I found." Tom pulled out another document, a birth certificate yellowed with age. "This was hidden in Mrs. Ashford's desk in a secret compartment I discovered while finishing the library work." Elena read the certificate with growing amazement. Sarah Elizabeth Ashford, born in Magnolia Creek, Georgia. Parents: Josephine Eleanor Ashford and William James Ashford. "Your mother," Tom said gently. "She was Josephine's daughter." "I know," Elena whispered. "I found Josephine's journal. She'd been looking for my mother for 20 years. Tom's expression shifted to surprise. "You knew, then why didn't you?" "Because knowing doesn't change anything. My mother left this place for a reason, Tom. She never spoke about her family, never wanted to come back. Maybe I should respect that." Tom knelt beside Elena's chair, taking her hands in his. "Or maybe she would want you to have the family she lost. Elena, Mrs. Ashford spent 2 decades searching for your mother. When she couldn't find Sarah, she found you instead. She watched you rebuild your life after the accident, and she saw something in you that reminded her of the daughter she loved and lost." Elena looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth and strength in Tom's calloused fingers. "What if I'm not who she thought I was? What if I disappoint her memory?" "Impossible," Tom said firmly. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived an accident that could have broken you, but instead you chose to help other people heal. You walked into a hostile situation in Magnolia Creek and faced it with grace and dignity. Mrs. Ashford saw exactly who you are." Eleanor felt tears threatening. For the first time since leaving Magnolia Creek, she allowed herself to hope. "So what do? We go back. We expose Marcus's forgery, and you claim what's rightfully yours. And then?" Tom's eyes grew soft, and he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "And then we see what happens between a construction foreman and the woman who owns the most beautiful house in Georgia." They drove back to Magnolia Creek that afternoon, stopping first at Benjamin Patterson's office to present the evidence of the forged will. The elderly attorney examined the documents carefully, his expression growing grave. "This is very serious," Patterson said. "If Mr. Marcus Ashford is responsible for this forgery, he's committed a felony. I'll need to contact the authorities immediately." Within hours, the story had spread throughout Magnolia Creek. Marcus was arrested at his law office, the fake will was exposed, and Elena's rightful inheritance was confirmed. But rather than vindication, Elena felt only sadness. A family had been torn apart by greed and deception. That evening, she and Tom sat in Josephine's hidden room, surrounded by decades of longing and lost connections. Elena had been reading, through more of her grandmother's journal entries, piecing together the story of her mother's departure. "She was 18, Elena told Tom. My mother. She fell in love with a man Josephine didn't approve of, my father. When Josephine tried to forbid the relationship, my mother ran away with him. They eloped and moved to Atlanta, and my mother was too proud to ever reach out. And Mrs. Ashford was too proud to make the first move," Tom observed. "Too stubborn. Women who loved each other, but couldn't get past their hurt." Elena closed the journal gently. "By the time Josephine started searching, my parents had changed their name from Ashford to Whitmore. My father wanted to start fresh, leave the past behind. Josephine never found them." Tom reached over and took Elena's hand. "But she found you. 3 years too late." They sat in comfortable silence, processing the weight of the family history that surrounded them. Finally, Tom spoke. "What will you do now?" Elena looked around the room that represented so much pain and love intertwined. "I want to understand her better. I want to learn about the woman who spent 20 years searching for her family." Over the following weeks, Elena immersed herself in Josephine's life. She talked to long-time residents who remembered her grandmother as a young woman, visited the church where generations of Ashfords had worshipped, and slowly pieced together the story of a woman who had been shaped by love and loss in equal measure. Tom was with her every step of the way, his steady presence a comfort as she navigated the emotional minefield of family history. Their relationship deepened naturally, built on shared work in the house and garden, long conversations on the porch, and the growing certainty that they belonged together. The town's attitude toward Elena began to shift as well. With Marcus's deception exposed, people started to see her differently, not as a fortune hunter, but as the rightful heir to the Ashford legacy. The spray paint was cleaned from the gate, and neighbors began offering tentative smiles when she passed. 1 month after her return, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. She was cleaning out Josephine's bedroom when she found a packet of letters hidden in the bottom drawer of an antique dresser. The return address made her heart stop. Sarah Whitmore, Atlanta, Georgia. With shaking hands, Elena opened the first letter, dated just 2 years after her mother's elopement. "Dear Mother, I know you probably don't want to hear from me after the things I said, but I wanted you to know that David and I are married now. We had a simple ceremony, and I wore grandmother's. And pearl earrings, the ones you gave me for my 16th birthday. I miss you, Mother. I miss home. I was angry when I left, but I've had time to think, and I realize that you were only trying to protect me. Maybe we could talk. Maybe we could find a way past this hurt. I love you, Sarah." Elena read through letter after letter, each one a plea for reconciliation. Her mother had written for 5 years, sharing news of her marriage, her pregnancy, Elena's birth, and the small joys and challenges of building a life in Atlanta. The letters grew less frequent over time, and the last one was dated when Elena was 6 years old. "Dear Mother, Elena started school this week. She's bright and curious, just like you were. She asks about her grandmother sometimes, and I never know what to tell her. I've been writing to you for years without receiving a single response. I understand that you may never forgive me for choosing David over your wishes, but I had hoped that time would heal the wound between us. This will be my last letter. I can't keep reaching out to someone who doesn't want to be found. But if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to know your granddaughter, we're here. With love and regret, Sarah Eleanor sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by her mother's words, and wept. Tom found her there an hour later and held her as the full tragedy of the situation became clear. She never got them, Elena sobbed against his chest. My mother wrote for years, and Josephine never got the letters. That's why she thought Sarah never wanted to reconcile. Tom examined the envelopes carefully. They were all addressed to Josephine's maiden name at the manor's old address, before the rural delivery system had been updated. Somehow, the letters had been delivered to the house but never reached their intended recipient. Marcus, Tom said grimly. He was handling Mrs. Ashford's business affairs even back then. He must have intercepted the letters. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow. Marcus had orchestrated a 20-year separation between mother and daughter, allowing pride and misunderstanding to fester into permanent estrangement. His greed had cost Eleanor, her grandmother, and her mother the chance at reconciliation. But there was one more letter in the packet, and this one was different. The envelope was never opened, and it was addressed in Josephine's careful script for Sarah when she comes home. Inside, Eleanor found her grandmother's final letter to her daughter. My darling Sarah, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally come back to Magnolia Creek. I pray that you can forgive a foolish old woman who let pride cost her the most precious thing in her life. You. I was wrong to try to control your heart. I was wrong to disapprove of David without giving him a chance to prove himself. I was wrong to let you leave without fighting harder to keep you home. I have spent 20 years searching for you, my darling girl. I hired investigators, placed advertisements, contacted every Ashford family in Georgia and beyond. I never stopped hoping that someday you would walk through that front door and let me hold you again. I know about Elena. I know she is beautiful and strong and everything a grandmother could hope for in a granddaughter. I know about the accident that took you from her, and I know about the courage she showed in rebuilding her life afterward. Since I cannot give my love to you, I am giving it to her. She is your legacy, Sarah, and the answer to all my prayers. For a second chance, tell her about the magnolia trees in the back garden. We planted them together when you were small. Tell her about the secret room where you used to hide when you were angry with me. Tell her that love runs in the Ashford women's blood, and that sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes it means holding on. I love you both with all my heart. Mother Elena read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Josephine had known about her mother's death, had known about the accident, and had chosen to love Elena from afar rather than intrude on her grief. But there was something else in the envelope. A small key tied with a ribbon. Elena recognized it immediately as the key to the secret room, the space where Josephine had kept her vigil of love and hope. As the sun set over Magnolia Creek, Eleanor and Tom sat in the garden among the magnolia trees her grandmother and mother had planted together. Decades ago, the weight of family history settled around them, but for the first time since learning the truth about her inheritance, Eleanor felt peace. She loved us both, she said quietly. Even when she couldn't have us, she loved us. Tom's arm tightened around her shoulders. And now you're here where you belong. Elena looked up at the manor that had become her home, its windows glowing golden in the evening light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the legal proceedings against Marcus, decisions about the future of the estate, and the ongoing process of healing the wounds left by years of separation. But tonight she was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by love that had endured across generations and guided her home at last. The morning of Marcus's trial arrived crisp and clear, with autumn sunlight filtering through the magnolia trees that were just beginning to turn. Elena sat at the breakfast table, pushing eggs around on her plate, while Tom read through the legal documents they would present in court. "You don't have to testify," he said for the third time. "Patterson says the documentary evidence is strong enough on its own." "I want to," Elena replied firmly. "Marcus destroyed 20 years of my mother's life and 20 years of Josephine's. Someone needs to speak for them." Tom reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Over the past 2 months, their relationship had deepened into something Elena had never experienced before, a love built on complete acceptance and unwavering support. He'd stood by her through the revelation of family secrets, the legal complexities, and the slow process of earning the town's trust. "Then I'll be right there with you," he said simply. The Magnolia Creek courthouse was packed. Elena wheeled herself through the crowd, aware of the whispers and curious stares that followed her progress. Some faces showed sympathy now instead of suspicion, but others remained skeptical. The truth about Marcus's deception had divided the town. Those who had genuinely cared for Josephine were horrified by his betrayal, while others struggled to accept that one of their own could be capable of such cruelty. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit unable to hide the defeat in his posture. When his eyes met Elena's across the courtroom, she saw not the arrogant man who had threatened her inheritance, but a broken person who had let greed poison everything good in his life. The proceedings moved swiftly. Tom's friend Jake testified about the forged will, presenting technical evidence that left no doubt about Marcus's deception. Benjamin Patterson read selections from Josephine's journal, painting a picture of a woman who had spent decades searching for her lost daughter. When Elena's turn came to testify, she wheeled herself to the witness box with quiet dignity. "Miss Whitmore," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell the court about your relationship with Mrs. Josephine Ashford?" Elena looked out at the packed courtroom, seeing Tom's encouraging smile in the front row. "I never met my grandmother while she was alive," she began, her voice clear and strong. "But through her letters and journals, I've come to know her as a woman who made mistakes, as we all do, but who never stopped loving her family." She testified about finding her mother's intercepted letters, about the years of separation that could have been avoided, about Josephine's secret vigil of hope. When the prosecutor asked about Marcus's actions, Elena's voice remained steady. "Marcus Ashford stole more than money from my family. He stole 20 years of love between a mother and daughter. He stole my chance to know my grandmother while she was alive. But most of all, he stole my mother's peace. She died thinking her own mother had rejected her completely." During cross-examination, Marcus's attorney tried to portray Elena as an opportunistic outsider, but his questions only served to highlight her dignity and the genuine pain caused by his client's deception. When the defense rested, Marcus himself asked to address the court. He stood slowly, his face haggard with guilt and exhaustion. "Your Honor," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I can't undo what I've done. I can't give Elena back her grandmother or Sarah back her mother's forgiveness. I let jealousy and greed turn me into someone I don't recognize." He turned to look directly at Elena. "Mrs. Ashford loved you before she ever met you. She used to talk about your strength, your determination to help others despite your own challenges. She said you reminded her of Sarah, stubborn and brave and full of love. I hated that she saw those qualities in a stranger when she'd never seen them in me." Elena felt tears threatening as Marcus continued. "I intercepted those letters because I was afraid that if Sarah came home, there would be no place for me in Aunt Josephine's affections. Instead, I guaranteed that no one could. Be happy. I robbed us all of the family we could have been. The judge's sentence was fair but firm. Marcus would serve 2 years for fraud and forgery, and he would make full restitution for any legal costs Elena had incurred. But more importantly, the truth was now public record. Josephine's love for her lost family was vindicated, and Elena's place in Magnolia Creek was no longer in question. As they left the courthouse, Elena was surprised to find a small crowd gathered on the steps. Mrs. Henderson from the diner approached first, her weathered face soft with regret. "I owe you an apology," she said simply. "We all do. We judged you without knowing the truth, and that's not the Magnolia Creek way." One by one, other townspeople approached, some to apologize, others simply to welcome her home. Jim Morrison, the contractor who had cancelled his project with Tom, shook both their hands. "I've got that barn renovation if you're still interested. Tom," he said gruffly, "and Miss Elena, if you ever need anything at all, you just let us know." As the crowd dispersed, Elena and Tom found themselves alone on the courthouse steps. The autumn air was crisp with the promise of winter, but Elena felt warmer than she had in years. "So what now?" Tom asked, echoing the question that had been between them for weeks. Eleanor looked across the square at Ashford Manor, its windows catching the late afternoon sun. She thought about Josephine's final letter to Sarah, about love that endures across generations, about second chances and the courage to seize them. "Now we go home," she said, "and we figure out how to honor the love that brought us together." That evening, they sat in Josephine's garden, as they had countless times before, but everything felt different now. The legal battle was over. Elena's place in Magnolia Creek was secure, and the truth about her family's history was finally complete. "I've been thinking," Elena said, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance among the magnolia blossoms, "about what to do with the inheritance." Tom waited quietly, understanding that this was something she needed to work through on her own. "Josephine wanted me to understand the true value of the Ashford legacy. I think I finally do." Elena turned to face him, her eyes bright with purpose. "It's not about the money or the house or even the family name. It's about love that doesn't give up, even when it seems hopeless." She pulled out a folder she'd been carrying all day. "I want to establish a foundation, the Sarah Josephine Ashford Foundation. It would provide rehabilitation services for accident survivors, especially in rural areas where resources are limited. And I want to convert part of the manor into a residential facility where people can stay during their recovery." Tom's face lit up with admiration and something deeper, pride in the woman he loved. "Elena, that's incredible. It's exactly what Mrs. Ashford would have wanted." "Is it crazy?" Elena asked, sudden doubt creeping into her voice. "Am I taking on too much?" Tom stood and knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his calloused ones. "You survived an accident that could have killed you. You rebuilt your entire life from scratch. You came to a town that didn't want you and won them over through sheer determination and grace. You faced down a legal challenge that could have destroyed you and came out stronger." He brought her hands to his lips, pressing gentle kisses to her palms. "Eleanor Ashford, there's nothing you can't do." The use of her grandmother's surname sent warmth flooding through Elena's chest. "Ashford, if you'll have it, if you'll have me." Tom's voice was rough with emotion. "I know we haven't talked about marriage, but Elena, I can't imagine my life without you in it. You're home to me, not this house, not this town, but you." Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at this man who had stood by her through everything, who had helped her uncover the truth about her family, who had shown her that love could be steady and sure and completely accepting. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes to all of it, to the foundation, to the name, to you." Tom stood and leaned down to kiss her, their lips meeting in a promise of the future they would build together. Around them, the magnolia trees rustled in the evening breeze, and Elena could almost hear Josephine's voice carried on the wind. Love runs in the Ashford women's blood, and sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes it means holding on. 6 months later, on a spring morning, when the magnolia trees were heavy with blooms, Eleanor and Tom were married in the garden behind Ashford Manor. The guest list included most of Magnolia Creek. The town had fully embraced their connection to the Ashford legacy, and Elena had become not just accepted but beloved. Benjamin Patterson officiated, having become ordained specifically for the occasion. Elena wore her grandmother's pearl earrings and her great-grandmother's wedding ring, carrying forward the love of generations past into her new beginning. During the ceremony, she looked out at the faces of their friends and neighbors, at the house that had become truly home, at Tom, whose steady love had made everything possible. In the front row sat Mrs. Henderson and Jim Morrison, the postmaster, and the librarian, the banker and the mechanic, a whole town that had learned to see beyond their initial prejudices, to embrace the love story unfolding in their midst. But it was Tom's eyes that held Elena's attention as they exchanged vows. In them, she saw her future, not just as his wife, but as a full partner in building something beautiful from the ashes of old pain. "I promise to love you not despite your challenges, but because of the strength they've given you," Tom said, his voice carrying clearly across the garden. "I promise to be your partner in every dream, your comfort in every sorrow, and your greatest champion in every victory." Elena's own vows came from a heart finally at peace. "I promise to trust in the love that brought us together, to honor the family that led me home, and to build with you a legacy of hope that will outlast us both." As they kissed to seal their marriage, the spring breeze scattered magnolia petals like confetti around them, and Elena knew that somewhere, somehow, Josephine was smiling. The Sarah Josephine Ashford Rehabilitation Center opened its doors the following autumn, welcoming its first residents to the beautifully restored wing of Ashford Manor. Elena served as its director, using her own experience and training to help others navigate the challenging journey of recovery after life-changing accidents. Tom expanded his construction business to specialize in accessible renovations, traveling throughout Georgia to help families modify their homes for loved ones with disabilities. But he always returned to Magnolia Creek, to the house where he'd first fallen in love with a woman who taught him that strength comes in many forms. On quiet evenings, they would sit in Josephine's garden, planning new programs for the center, or simply enjoying the peace they'd found together. The manor bustled with activity now. Staff members, residents, visiting families, and the general warmth of a house finally fulfilling its purpose as a place of healing. In the hidden room that had once held Josephine's lonely vigil, Eleanor kept a new kind of shrine. Photos of rehabilitation center graduates, letters from families grateful for the services they'd received, awards recognizing the foundation's work. But in the place of honor sat Josephine's original journal and Sarah's intercepted letters, reminders of love that endures even in the face of misunderstanding and loss. Sometimes Elena would find herself standing at the manor's front windows, looking out at the road that led to town, and she understood now what Tom had meant when he'd said Josephine used to watch as if waiting for someone. She hadn't been waiting. For Elena specifically, she'd been waiting for love to find its way home, and it had, in ways more beautiful and complex than anyone could have imagined. Through tragedy and forgiveness, through legal battles and small-town gossip, through the patient work of building trust and the leap of faith that love requires, Elena had found not just an inheritance, but a true legacy. The knowledge that love planted with hope, tended with persistence, and nurtured with faith will always eventually bloom. As autumn deepened into winter and winter gave way to spring again, the magnolia trees in Josephine's garden grew taller and stronger, their roots intertwining deep beneath the Georgia soil. And in the house they sheltered, love continued to grow as well, between a woman who had learned to trust again and a man who had shown her that some things are worth fighting for, in a town that had discovered that the best families are sometimes the ones we choose rather than the ones we're born into. The story that had begun with a mysterious letter and a reluctant inheritance had become something far greater, a testament to the power of love to transcend time, heal old wounds, and create new possibilities for joy. Elena Ashford Caldwell had found her way home at last, not to a place on a map, but to a state of belonging that would last the rest of her days. And in the garden where magnolia blossoms danced in the Georgia breeze, the legacy of the Ashford women continued. Love that endures, love that forgives, love that always finds a way home. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel, subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments so you don't miss the next episodes. See you in the next story.